The message came on a Tuesday morning. It arrived through every satellite, every radio tower, and every communication device on Earth at exactly the same moment. The words were simple. The Galactic Coalition of Aligned Species invited humanity to join their great assembly. After 12,000 years of ignoring the small blue planet, the galaxy had finally noticed Earth. People danced in the streets. World leaders made speeches about a new era of peace and cooperation. Scientists wept with joy. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Park Do-hyun watched the celebrations from his small apartment in Seoul. He was 63 years old. His hair had turned gray long ago, and his hands carried scars from a war that most people had forgotten. He did not dance. He did not weep. He simply read the message again and again, looking for the words that were not written. 3 days later, the United Earth Council called him. They wanted him to be humanity's first ambassador to the stars. Do-hyun almost refused. He was old. He was tired. He had spent 40 years as a diplomat, negotiating ceasefires in burning cities and peace treaties in bombed-out buildings. He had seen the worst of humanity and somehow still believed in its best, but the council was clear. They needed someone who understood power, someone who could read the silence between words, someone who had survived impossible situations and still found ways to build bridges. They needed Park Do-hyun. He accepted the position on one condition. He would choose his own team. His first call was to Kim Yuna. She was 31 years old, brilliant beyond measure, and possessed a gift that seemed almost supernatural. She could learn any language in weeks. By the time the invitation arrived, she had already decoded 17 alien languages from intercepted transmissions that Earth scientists had been studying for decades. Yuna was not a diplomat. She was blunt, impatient, and had little tolerance for political games. But Do-hyun did not need another politician. He needed someone who could understand what the aliens were really saying. She agreed. Immediately, the diplomatic vessel Horizon launched 6 months later. It was the finest ship humanity had ever built, but Do-hyun knew it was nothing compared to what waited among the stars. He stood at the observation window as Earth grew smaller and smaller behind them. Yuna joined him after an hour. She carried a tablet filled with notes on coalition species, their customs, their languages, their histories. "I have been studying the Valari," she said. "They are one of the founding species. Very powerful. Very old. What do they think of humans?" Do-hyun asked. Yuna hesitated. "Their word for us translates roughly as temporary creatures. It is not meant as an insult. They simply do not expect us to last." Do-hyun nodded slowly. He had heard such words before, from enemies who believed his country would fall, from generals who believed his people would surrender. He had outlasted all of them. The journey took 3 weeks. When the Horizon finally arrived at Senate Station, Do-hyun understood why the aliens viewed humanity as insignificant. The station was massive beyond comprehension. It stretched across the darkness like a mechanical god, housing millions of beings from hundreds of worlds. Ships the size of cities floated around it like insects around a lamp. The Horizon looked like a toy beside them. A Valari official met them at the docking bay. His name was Kreth, and he stood nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in hard plates that clicked when he moved. His eyes were black and showed no emotion. "You are the human representatives," Kreth said. It was not a question. "I am Ambassador Park Do-hyun. This is my deputy, Kim Yuna." Kreth studied them for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter. "Follow me. Your quarters have been prepared." The quarters were located in the lowest section of the station, near the waste recycling facilities. The room was small, barely large enough for 2 beds and a table. The walls were gray metal. There were no windows. Yuna's face turned red with anger. "This is an insult. Yes, Do-yun agreed calmly. It is. Should we protest? Demand better accommodations? Do-yun sat down on one of the hard beds. He had slept in worse places. Much worse. No, he said. We should thank them. Yuna stared at him. Thank them? They are showing us exactly what they think of humanity. That is valuable information. Now we know where we stand. The first session of the Galactic Senate was held the following day. Do-hyun and Yuna were given seats in the highest row, far from the central platform where the important species gathered. From their position, they could barely see the speakers, but they could hear everything. Kreth appeared before the session began. He handed Do-yun a small device. This is your translator. You will understand all languages spoken here. He paused, his black eyes fixed on the human ambassador. You have been given observer status. This means you may watch. You may listen. You may not speak. You may not vote. You may not interfere in any matter. Is this understood? Do-yun took the translator. It is understood. Good. Humanity is young. Perhaps in a few thousand years, you will earn the right to participate. Kreth walked away without waiting for a response. Yuna leaned close to Do-yun. A few thousand years, she whispered. They expect us to sit in silence for a few thousand years. Do-yun placed the translator in his ear. The voices of 200 species suddenly became clear. A massive chorus of sounds transformed into words he could understand. They expect many things, he said quietly. They expect us to be grateful for this seat. They expect us to be impressed by their power. They expect us to know our place and never question it. He looked down at the great chamber below, at the delegates of ancient civilizations who had ruled the stars since before humans had discovered fire. They do not know us yet, he said, but they will. The session began. For 4 days, Do-yun and Yuna sat in their high seats and watched. They took notes. They studied the relationships between species. They learned which delegates held real power and which were merely puppets. They memorized the rules, the traditions, and the unspoken codes that governed this ancient assembly. They said nothing. They waited on the 5th day. Everything changed. The 5th day began like any other. Delegates took their seats. The speaker, an ancient being whose species no longer had a name, called the assembly to order. Routine matters were discussed. Trade agreements, border disputes, mining rights on distant moons. Then the Morthic delegate rose to speak. The Morthic were feared throughout the galaxy. Their empire controlled over 200 worlds, and they had built their power through conquest and intimidation. The delegate was massive, nearly 4 meters of muscle and bone covered in dark scales. His voice was deep enough to shake the walls. I bring a matter of enforcement before this assembly, he announced. The world-designated Nexer 7 has failed to meet its tribute obligations for 3 consecutive cycles. As per coalition law, I invoke the right of harvest. Do-yun leaned forward in his seat. Beside him, Yuna was already searching through her records. Nexer 7, she whispered. Small agricultural world. Population of approximately 8 million. They joined the coalition about 200 years ago for protection against the Morthic. The tributes are impossible. They would have to give up 90% of their food production. And the right of harvest? Do-yun asked. Yuna's face went pale. Slavery. The Morthic are claiming the right to take the population as slaves. The speaker called for discussion. Do-hyun watched as delegate after delegate spoke. Some expressed mild concern. Others praised the Morthic for their patience. Not one of them objected to the harvest itself. The Nexari have shown disrespect to the coalition, said the Velari delegate Kreth. They must face consequences. I support the Morthic claim. As do we, said a delegate from the core collective. Order must be maintained. Do-Yoon counted the speakers. 15, 20, 30. All in favor. Not a single voice of opposition. The speaker called for a vote. 200 hands, claws, and appendages rose in approval. The motion passed unanimously. 8 million people had just been sentenced to slavery, and it had taken less than an hour. Yuna's hands were shaking. They did not even discuss alternatives. They did not suggest negotiation or debt restructuring or any other solution. They just agreed. Do-Yoon said nothing. He watched as the Morphic delegates smiled with satisfaction. He watched as the other delegates moved on to the next item on their agenda, as if they had not just destroyed an entire civilization. He had seen this before. He had seen powerful nations sacrifice smaller ones for convenience. He had seen allies abandoned and populations forgotten. He had believed, foolishly perhaps, that the galaxy would be different. It was not different. It was the same. It was worse. The session ended 3 hours later. As the delegates filed out, a small figure approached the human section. He was young, perhaps the equivalent of a human teenager, with gray skin and large dark eyes. He wore the simple robes of a minor delegation. "You are the humans," he said. His voice was soft and tired. "Yes," Do-Yoon replied. "Who are you?" "My name is Tal. I am the representative of Nexus 7. Do-Yoon felt something cold settle in his chest. This child had just watched his entire world be condemned, and now he stood before strangers asking a question. "Why did you not speak?" The words hung in the air. Do-Yoon opened his mouth, but no answer came. What could he say? That they were forbidden from speaking? That they were new and powerless and afraid? "I am sorry," he finally said. "We did not know what to do." Tal nodded slowly. There was no anger in his eyes, only a vast and terrible sadness. "No one ever does," he said. "No one ever speaks. That is how they win. That is how they have always won." He walked away without another word. That night, Do-Yoon could not sleep. He sat in their small gray room and stared at the wall. Yuna sat across from him, equally restless. "We have to do something," she said. "We are observers. We have no power here. Then why did they invite us? Why bring humanity to this place if they expect us to do nothing?" Do-Yoon had been asking himself the same question. The answer, when it finally came to him, was ugly. "They want witnesses," he said slowly. "They want humanity to see their power and their order. They want us to understand that this is how the galaxy works. And then they want us to go home and tell Earth that there is no point in resistance. That the only choice is to accept our place. Our place in the lowest tier," Yuna said bitterly. "Our place near the garbage." "Yes," she stood up suddenly. "I cannot accept that. I will not accept that. Neither will I." Do-Yoon walked to the small terminal in their room. It was meant for basic communication, but Yuna had already modified it during their first night. She had a talent for finding doors that were supposed to be closed. "Can you access the Senate archives?" he asked. "Some of them. The older records have weaker security." "Why?" "I want to know the truth. I want to know what this coalition really is." They worked through the night. Hour after hour, they pulled records from the depths of the archive. What they found was worse than anything they had imagined. The coalition had existed for 12,000 years, and for 12,000 years, it had operated the same way. Weak species were admitted with promises of protection, and slowly crushed by impossible demands. Those who could not pay were harvested, enslaved, or simply erased from existence. The Morphic were not an exception. They were the rule. Every powerful species in the coalition had built their wealth on the suffering of others. The laws were designed to make this legal. The traditions were designed to make this normal. The entire system was a machine for turning lives into profit. There are records of over 200 species that no longer exist, Una said. Her voice was hollow. Harvested, exterminated, forgotten, and every single action was approved by unanimous vote. Do-Yoon studied the numbers. 200 species, billions of lives, and humanity had been invited to watch. They wanted us complicit, he said. They wanted us to vote yes, like everyone else, to add our voice to the chorus, to become part of their machine. What do we do? He looked at the data on the screen. He thought of Tal, the young delegate who had asked why humans did not speak. He thought of the 8 million people on Nexer 7, who are now waiting for Morthic ships to arrive. He thought of all the times in human history when the powerful had crushed the weak, and how sometimes, rarely, someone had found a way to fight back. We speak, he said. We do what they told us we could not do. We speak. Una met his eyes. They will punish us. They might kill us. Perhaps. But Tal asked me a question today, and I did not have an answer. I will not let that happen again. He began to plan. The next session opened with routine business. Trade disputes between minor worlds. A complaint about shipping lanes. A request for additional funding for border patrol stations. The delegates moved through the agenda with practiced boredom, their attention wandering, their minds already on other matters. No one noticed when the human ambassador stood from his seat in the highest row. No one noticed when he began walking down the long stairs toward the central platform. Kreth was the first to see him. The Valari delegate rose from his seat with a sharp clicking sound. Human, what are you doing? Return to your position immediately. Do-Young did not stop. He continued walking step by step until he reached the speaker's platform at the center of the great chamber. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The room fell silent. I invoke the right of witness, Do-Young announced. His voice was calm and clear. Article 7, Section 14 of the Coalition Charter. Any delegate who has witnessed a crime against sentient life may address the Assembly without restriction. Chaos erupted. The Morthic delegate roared with fury. Kreth demanded his immediate removal. Voices shouted in a dozen languages, all of them angry, all of them afraid. But the speaker raised one ancient hand, and the chamber fell silent. The human speaks truth, the speaker said. The right of witness is written in our oldest laws. It has not been invoked in over 3,000 years, but it remains valid. The human may speak. The Morthic delegate stepped forward. This is absurd. Humans have observer status only. They have no standing to invoke ancient rights. The Charter makes no distinction, the speaker replied. Any delegate may invoke the right of witness. The human holds a seat in this assembly. Therefore, he is a delegate. Therefore, he may speak. Do-Young waited for the arguments to fade. Then he began. Yesterday, this assembly voted to harvest the population of Nexer 7. 8 million people will be taken from their homes and sold into slavery. The vote was unanimous. Not one delegate objected. Not one delegate asked if there was another way. He paused, letting the words settle. I have spent the past several days studying your archives. I have read your history. I have seen the records of what this coalition has done in the name of order and peace. He gestured to Una, who stood at the edge of the platform with a small device in her hands. A holographic display flickered to life above the assembly, filling the air with images. The Veth, Do-Young said. A peaceful species of artists and philosophers, harvested 8,000 years ago for failure to pay tributes. Population, 12 billion. Current status, extinct. The image showed a beautiful world covered in forests and crystal towers. Then it showed the same world burning. The Korath, a species of engineers and builders, harvested 6,000 years ago. Population, 9 billion. Current status, extinct. More images. More burning worlds. More empty cities. The pale dancers. The Yith, the morning people. The children of the outer ring. Species after species, world after world, life after life. All harvested. All erased. All approved by unanimous vote of this assembly. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others stared at the images with expressions that might have been guilt or might have been anger. Do-Yun continued for 3 hours. He named every atrocity. He quoted their own laws. He showed them the documents they had signed, the orders they had given, the graves they had filled. He spoke without anger, without accusation, without judgment. He simply told the truth. When he finished, the chamber was silent. "You have built an empire on suffering," Do-Yun said. "You have called it peace. You have called it order. You have made yourselves believe that this is the only way. But it is not the only way. It is simply the way you have chosen." He turned to Yuna. She stepped forward and held up a small data chip. "This contains every record we have found, every harvest order, every slave contract, every execution warrant, every vote." She placed the chip on the speaker's podium. "This information has already been transmitted to every communication relay in the galaxy. Every species, aligned or not, now has access to your archives." The Morthic delegate lunged forward with a roar. "You dare? You dare expose our internal affairs to the entire galaxy?" "They were not your internal affairs," Do-Yun replied. "They were crimes. And crimes do not remain hidden forever." Kreth rose from his seat. "This is an act of war. This human has violated every protocol of diplomatic conduct. I demand immediate expulsion and punishment." Other voices joined him. The chamber descended into shouting and accusations. The speaker tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Finally, a vote was called. The motion was simple. Humanity would be expelled from the coalition. Their diplomatic status would be revoked. They would be declared enemies of galactic order. The vote passed. 187 in favor. 13 abstentions. No opposition. 2 guards approached Do-Yun. They were large, heavily armed, and clearly eager to remove him by force. Do-Yun looked at them calmly. Then he looked at the assembly. "You misunderstand what has happened here," he said. "You believe this is the end. You believe you can expel us and return to your comfortable silence. But you are wrong." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communicator. He pressed a single button. "This is Ambassador Park Do-Yun to all human diplomatic personnel. Begin Protocol 7. Across the galaxy, 47 human diplomats received the message. They were stationed on 12 different coalition worlds, sent there months ago as observers and cultural attaches. Each of them had been given the same instructions. Each of them had been waiting for this moment. On Senate Station, Ambassador Choi Sunwoo walked into the central plaza and began speaking to anyone who would listen. On Morthic Prime, Dr. Kong Mai-Ray uploaded files to the Planetary News Network. On the Valari homeworld, Lieutenant Yoon Jasu stood outside the government complex with a holographic display showing the coalition's true history. 47 humans. 47 voices. 47 witnesses speaking the truth on Fort. Why 7 worlds? Do-Yun watched the chaos spread through the chamber as reports came in from across the galaxy. The delegates were panicking. Their communications were overwhelmed with questions and demands and accusations. "We are not leaving," Do-Yun said, "and we are not asking for your permission anymore. You invited us here to make us part of your machine. Instead, you have given us the greatest weapon in the universe." The Morthic delegate grabbed him by the collar. "And what weapon is that, human?" Do-Yun smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when he first arrived at this station, when he was given a room next to the garbage, when he was told to sit in silence for 1,000 years. "The truth," he said. And now everyone can hear it. The galaxy burned with words. On every world where humans had been stationed, the truth spread like fire through dry grass. People who had never questioned the coalition suddenly found themselves reading records of atrocities committed in their name. Species that had believed themselves protected learned that their neighbors had been harvested, enslaved, erased from existence. Within 1 week, 18 species withdrew from the coalition. Their delegates packed their belongings and left Senate Station without ceremony. They did not announce their reasons. They did not need to. Everyone knew. On Nexus 7, the people watched the news from the stars and made a decision. When the Morthic ships arrived to begin the harvest, they found a planet that refused to surrender. Farmers armed themselves with tools. Teachers organized defense networks. Children helped build barricades in the streets. They were not soldiers. They had no weapons that could match Morthic technology. But they had something they had never had before. They had hope. The message came from the human ambassador 3 days before the Morthic fleet was scheduled to land. It was short and simple. "Hold on. Help is coming." Admiral Beek-Hanna commanded Earth's first fleet. It was not a large force by galactic standards. 12 ships, each one carrying only defensive weapons and basic supplies. They had been launched before the Senate vote, sent toward Nexus 7 under orders that few people understood. Now those orders made sense. The fleet arrived in Nexari, space 1 day before the Morthic. Admiral Beek positioned her ships in orbit and waited. When the massive Morthic warships appeared on the edge of the system, she broadcast a single message on every frequency. "This is Admiral Beek-Hanna of Earth's First Fleet. We are here as witnesses. The galaxy is watching. Whatever happens next will be seen by every species in Coalition space and beyond. Choose carefully." The Morthic commander was furious. "You have no authority here, human. This harvest has been approved by the Coalition. You are interfering with lawful action." "The Coalition has expelled us," Beek replied calmly. "We are no longer bound by their laws. And since your harvest was authorized by an organization we do not recognize, we see no reason to respect it. You cannot stop us. Your ships are nothing compared to ours. You are correct. We cannot stop you. But we can watch. We can record. We can broadcast everything you do to every corner of the galaxy. And when you are finished, every species will know exactly what the Morthic are." The Morthic fleet hesitated. They had expected resistance. They had prepared for battle. But they had not prepared for cameras. Back on Earth, Director Shin Minji coordinated the next phase of humanity's campaign. She sat in a room filled with screens, each one showing a different world, a different crisis, a different opportunity. "The Velari homeworld is requesting information about the harvest records," her assistant reported. "Their population is asking questions. Send them everything. Include the records from the Korath harvest. The Velari were directly involved in that one. The Pale Dancers have made contact. They want to know if the rumors are true." Minji pulled up the file. The Pale Dancers were a species that had been thought extinct for over 4,000 years. But according to human intelligence, small populations had survived in hidden colonies on the outer rim. They had been living in fear for millennia, convinced that the Coalition would find them and finish what they had started. Tell them the rumors are true. Tell them they are not alone anymore. And tell them we would like to talk. This was humanity's war. Not a war of weapons and soldiers, but a war of information and connection. Every day, human diplomats reached out to forgotten species, to subjugated populations, to anyone who had suffered under coalition rule. They offered no weapons. They made no demands. They simply said, "We see you. We hear you. You are not alone." The effect was extraordinary. On Morthic Prime, slave rebellions erupted in 17 cities. Workers who had been told their whole lives that resistance was impossible suddenly found the courage to fight. They did not win every battle. Many of them died. But they fought, and that was something that had not happened in over 1,000 years. On the Valari homeworld, young people began questioning their government. They demanded access to the archives. They demanded answers about the species their ancestors had harvested. The ruling council tried to suppress the movement, but the information was already everywhere. The coalition was crumbling. Ambassador Park Do-yoon watched it happen from his small room on Senate Station. He had refused to leave, even after the expulsion vote. The coalition guards had been ordered to remove him by force, but somehow the order was never carried out. Perhaps they were afraid of creating a martyr. Perhaps they simply did not know what to do with a human who refused to be afraid. Yuna brought him reports every hour. More species withdrawing. More rebellions starting. More voices speaking truths that had been forbidden for thousands of years. "The Morthic have requested negotiations," she said one morning. "They want to discuss the situation on Nexer 7. Do-yun looked up from his notes. "They want to negotiate? Their commander says the harvest has been ... postponed. They are willing to discuss alternatives." It was a small victory. 8 million lives that would not be taken today. But Do-yun knew it was only the beginning. What about the other species? The ones who abstained from the expulsion vote? They are watching, waiting. Some of them have contacted our diplomats privately. They are interested in ... alternatives. Alternatives to what? To the coalition. To the way things have always been. They want to know if there is another way. Do-yun stood and walked to the small window in their room. Outside, he could see the massive structure of Senate Station. The ships of 100 worlds coming and going. The machinery of an empire that had ruled for 12,000 years. "There is always another way," he said quietly. "Someone just has to be willing to show it." A message arrived from Admiral Beak. The Morthic fleet had withdrawn from Nexari space. They had not fired a single shot. They had simply watched the human ships watching them, and they had decided that today was not the day. On Nexer 7, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They saw 12 small human ships orbiting their world, protecting them with nothing but cameras and courage. And for the first time in their history, they believed that tomorrow might be different. The war without weapons had begun, and humanity was winning. The Treaty of Nexer was signed on a warm afternoon, under a sky that had once been filled with fear. Delegates from 43 worlds gathered in the capital city of Nexer 7. They came from species that had been enemies for centuries. They came from populations that had been enslaved, forgotten, written off as extinct. They came because a single human had stood in the heart of an empire and told the truth. Ambassador Park Do-hyun stood at the front of the assembly. Beside him was Tal, the young Nexari who had asked him a simple question months ago. Tal was no longer a minor delegate. His people had elected him to represent them in this new age, this age they had never believed would come. "We are here to end something old," Do-hyun said, "and to begin something new." The terms of the treaty were read aloud. The Galactic Coalition would be dissolved. Its laws would be struck from the records. Its systems of tribute and harvest would be abolished forever. In its place, a new organization would rise. The Free Worlds Congress would operate on principles that seemed revolutionary to most species present, but were familiar to any student of human history. Equal representation. No species above another. Disputes settled through negotiation, not domination. Slavery forbidden in all forms, under all circumstances. The Morthic delegate stood in the back of the assembly. His name was Groth, and he had been sent to represent his empire in these negotiations. He was not happy. His people had ruled through fear for 10,000 years, and now they were being asked to give it up, but his empire was burning. Rebellions had spread to half their worlds. Their allies had abandoned them. Their economy was collapsing. They had no choice but to negotiate. When the reading finished, Groth stepped forward. "I have a question for the human ambassador," he said. His voice was cold, but there was something else in it now. Something that might have been curiosity. "Ask," Do-Yon replied. "How did you do this? How did your species, barely a century into space travel, dismantle an order that has stood for 12,000 years? You have no great fleet. You have no advanced weapons. You have nothing that should have allowed you to challenge us." Do-Yon considered the question. He looked at Yuna, who had translated documents and decoded secrets. He looked at the holographic image of Admiral Beek-Hana, who had faced down warships with nothing but cameras. He looked at Director Shin Minji, who had coordinated 47 diplomats across 12 worlds. He looked at Ta, who had dared to ask a question that changed everything. "You built your empire on silence," Do-Yon said. "You told the weak that no one would help them. You told the strong that cruelty was necessary. You told everyone that this was the only way things could be, and for 12,000 years, everyone believed you." He paused. "Humans do not believe in silence. We believe in speaking, even when we are afraid. We believe in standing with the weak, even when it is dangerous. We believe that the truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken." Groth stared at him. "You declared war on an entire galactic order with nothing but words?" "No," Do-Yon said. "We declared war with something far more powerful." "And what is that?" Do-Yon smiled. It was not a triumphant smile, not a victorious smile. It was the smile of a man who had seen the worst of his own species and still believed in its best. "Hope," he said. "We gave people hope. The treaty was signed that afternoon." Representatives from 43 worlds pressed their marks onto the document. Some did so eagerly. Some did so reluctantly. But all of them did so because they understood that the old order was finished and something new was beginning. That night, there was a celebration in the streets of the Nexari capital. People who had been prepared to die as slaves now danced as free citizens. They sang songs that had been forbidden. They spoke names that had been erased. They remembered their dead and honored their living. Do-Yon watched from a balcony above the main square. He was tired. His bones ached. He had not slept properly in months. But he could not bring himself to leave this moment. Yuna joined him after an hour. "The Congress will meet for the first time next month," she said. "They want you to be the first speaker." Do-Yon shook his head. "That honor should go to someone else. Perhaps Ta. He has earned it. The delegates will be disappointed. They will survive." He smiled slightly. "I am not a leader, Yuna. I am a diplomat. My job was to speak when no one else would. Now that others are speaking, my work is done." She stood beside him in silence for a while. Below them, the celebration continued. "Do you think it will last?" she asked finally. "This peace, this new order, do you think it will hold?" Do-Yon thought about the question. He thought about human history, about the countless times people had built something beautiful only to watch it fall apart. He thought about the darkness that lived in every species, the greed and fear and hatred that never quite disappeared. "I do not know," he admitted. "Nothing lasts forever. But that is not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is that we tried. The point is that we spoke when we were told to be silent. The point is that we showed people another way, even if only for a moment. What they do with that moment is up to them. Yuna nodded slowly. It is enough. It has to be. Years later, historians would debate how humanity had achieved the impossible. They would write books and produce studies, and develop theories about the sociology of interstellar civilizations. Some said it was luck. Humanity had arrived at exactly the right moment, when the coalition was already weakening from internal contradictions. Some said it was strategy. The humans had studied their enemies carefully and found the precise weakness to exploit. Some said it was something deeper, a quality in the human spirit that made them uniquely suited to challenge tyranny, a stubbornness that refused to accept injustice, a strange belief that words could change the universe. But Park Bel-yun, when asked about it in his final years, gave a simpler answer. They prepared for everything, he said. They prepared for weapons and fleets and armies. They prepared for conquest and invasion and war. But they never prepared for the one thing that actually threatened them. And what was that? The interviewer asked. Do-yoon looked out the window of his small apartment. He was very old now and very tired. But his eyes still held the same spark they had held on the day he first walked into the Galactic Senate. Diplomats, he said. They never prepared for diplomats. And he smiled.